Welcome to Take the Lead Radio with Dr. Diane Hamilton, where she interviews some of the most successful leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, and other individuals who will inspire you to take the lead in your career and personal life. And now, here is Dr. Diane Hamilton.
I am here with Molly Bloom, who's an American entrepreneur and author of the 2014 memoir, Molly's Game, the true story of the 26-year-old woman behind the most exclusive high-stakes underground poker game in the world. You've probably seen the movie, and I'm very interested in talking to you today, Molly, because this movie caught my attention. I had not read the book before that, but it was such a fascinating story. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, that I don't even know where to begin because it was interesting how competitive you grew up with such an interesting family. I mean, your father kind of reminded me a little bit of my father, but
I get a lot of that.
I bet you do. Well, it's funny because my father was born legally blind. He had 2% vision, but his whole family was super competitive. So he wanted us to do the things he couldn't do, kind of. You know what I mean? And
oh, wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I was watching your dad, and it reminded me a little bit of mine. But Kevin Costner played him in the movie, which I thought he did a great job. And
I did too.
What was it like to watch this movie about your life? I mean, I know it's hard probably enough just to live it and to write about it, and then now you've got everybody experience it at such in 3D and in front of everybody. What was it like watching this movie? Was it like, did you feel like it represented really your story well, or was it weird because they made it Hollywood? Or I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, well, luckily, this has been a multi-step process. It first came writing the book, then came getting arrested and really having to go in as much or more detail with my criminal attorney, as I did in the book, more detail. Mm-hmm. And then pitching the movie to Aaron Sorkin, because he was my favorite writer, and he was kind of like, if you're going to go big, right? So he was like my top, and I got super lucky that the story resonated with him. But then spending 8 months with him and his team, really intimately going over the story again. So by the time I got to Toronto, the premiere, it's so funny how adaptable we are as humans. Like, you can be in the most extraordinary circumstances, and then over time you adapt to it. So it wasn't as weird as you would think, because it had really become sort of a part of my life for 4 years. But it was, at the same time, it was also so weird I couldn't really process it. And it was, the producers and Aaron said to me, you really need to sit and watch this movie by yourself in a room. And I'm like, if I do that, I'm going to pick it apart. And so I just wanted to sit at the Toronto Film Festival when it premieres with my family and 2,000 other people, And then five minutes before the movie started, I was like, where's the exit? Where's the exit? I need to get out of here.
That's funny. How
am I going to live through the next 2 hours and 25 minutes of essentially standing on stage in my underwear,
Right.
And this is testimony and really the answer to your question. I felt so honored by the movie that Aaron wrote and directed, and so grateful at the story that he told, that it was a magical moment.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine how many people who, how many people are listening, maybe not, didn't hear this, didn't read the book or didn't see the movie, or may not know what we're talking about. So I want to give a little more background about what it was. I mean, basically the premise is you were trained to become an Olympic skier when you were young, but when you got hurt trying out for the Olympics, you had to go in different directions. But you've always been this very driven person, and you happened to get into this job that landed you with this high stakes poker game in LA, and you've got around all these very wealthy individuals, sports figures, Hollywood celebrities, and it ends with you pleading guilty to reduce charges of problems that you got into. So can you tell a little bit about just the background of the story, other than, we know about your background that was really interesting as an Olympic skier, but I know we don't have a lot of time to go into that. But once you got to Los Angeles, and you just took this job. I'm curious how that led to the poker game. I mean, I know from the movie, but can you just give a little background?
Sure. Well, I grew up with two superhuman brothers. I mean, truly, these kids were prodigies from the get-go. Jordan intellectually, he was beating like the adults in my family at chess at 4.
Wow.
And he went on to become a Harvard-educated cardiothoracic surgeon. And Jeremy was just an incredible athlete from the get-go, and he is a 2-time Olympian. He was number 1 in the world, at 3 consecutive world championships. And then he went from the Turin Olympics to the Combine, NFL Combine, and got drafted 5th round to the Eagles. So this was the crowd I was playing with. And I felt really invisible, and I felt really overlooked. And I think I went out into the world with this determination to fix that. And I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it. I thought it would be, by my skiing career. And then I thought it would be going to an Ivy League law school. But in this year that I took off in between law school and after I had to retire from skiing, in which I went to Los Angeles, just basically to get away from the constant reminders of skiing, because my heart was broken.
Right.
And I got a waitressing job, and an executive assistant job. And I was just working all these small jobs. And my boss at the time said, I need you to serve drinks at my poker game. And I'm thinking, overgrown frat boys, red Solo cups, how hard can this be? How this is like, it'll be as like not compelling as all the other nights I'm serving drinks,
Right, right. Uh-huh.
And then the players start to arrive, and it's heads of studios, rappers, A-list actors, people that some of the most famous, some of the richest, some of the most powerful people on earth. And I had this light bulb moment. I didn't know anything about poker. I didn't know anything about what was, really going on. But I saw that these were 10 people who truly the world would vie to get in front of, to have access to the things they have access to, to build this network. And I saw that whatever was going on at that table had captivated these people who could literally be anywhere doing anything.
Right.
And over time, and then I made $3,000 at the end of the night. So I'm like, this is very interesting. I want to stay here. And so over time, over the next 6 months, I was like, I can see how to turn this into a business. And I first really learned the rules and the objective and the language of poker because that product. But then I started to study the customer, and I started to try to look at what motivated them and what this thing was all about. And, what I came to is that these guys could have anything they wanted. Things, it didn't really matter to them. The thing that this poker game was offering them was escapism. It was kind of, they get to walk in this room and feel like James Bond for a night. And so I started to really build on that. And I started to really look at ways that I could expand on these transformational experiences. And I ultimately took over the game, and I really ran it like a business. I really ran it from the position of a business like a startup. And ultimately I became not only the owner operator, but I also became the bank. So I was extending credit, covering, if somebody stiffed the game, I would cover it. And it was super lucrative and it was exciting. And then somewhere along the way, I just got a little lost, a lot lost. And the money got to me, and, the more got to me. I want more money. I want more games. I want more, and I went off the rails, and I took what was a legal business at the time, and I made a choice to take a percentage of the pots to cover my downside, to cover my risk.
Right.
And that was when it became illegal, and the law of the arm came down swiftly on me. I mean, they knew about this game, and I'm sure they were thinking of like, how can we just let this continue? This is, $100 million poker game.
Wow.
And so so I got arrested by the feds, and they seized my assets, and that was what I needed, truly. I mean, it's easier for me to say that now.
Yeah.
I've got some perspective, and I know my way out, my way out worked.
Well, you really went through a lot. I mean, just if that was pretty true to scale of what happened. I mean, I think what was fascinating, there were so many things that were fascinating to me about your story, is I understand the thrill of the power and and all that. But there's a point where, you're taking drugs, you're trying to keep up, you've got all this stuff going on, and you've got the Russians beating you up, you've got things going on. And I'm thinking, don't you get scared? You did not seem scared. The way Jessica portrayed you was this very strong person. And to me, if you've got a room full of Russians and all the things that you had, wasn't there this underlying gnawing, like, these guys could kill me, this is probably not a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, now when I look at that movie and I look at my choices and I look at who I became during that time, it's shocking. But I was all hopped up on ego and lack of sleep, and everyone around me was doing crazy things. It was just a crazy world. And I've always had this thing where I can get in, like, I had to do a lot of work on fear when I was a little kid, because I was born, I wasn't born like this, like, super brave. I was a kid, and I was in a lot of fear when I was little. And I quickly saw that didn't work in my life. And then also my dad kind of would not tolerate fear.
Right.
And so from a really young age, I learned how to overcome it. And it's an awesome skill to have. It's also a dangerous skill to have, because sometimes fear is there to alert you to the fact that, girl, you're in trouble,
Not a good idea, right?
Right. So, and then you combine, pills and alcohol and millions of dollars into the equation, and, like, you've got yourself a pretty dangerous concoction. So it was a big lesson to me. And what the most prolific thing that came from all the craziness that I caused, whether it's getting beaten up by the mob or getting arrested by 17 FBI agents at gunpoint, or having the Department of Justice seize all my assets, and just all these crazy things that happened that were of my own making, but that took a lot of took a big emotional toll on me, is I got so desperate and I was so helpless and hopeless that I actually did this work of taking a really honest, rigorous look at who I was in the world, owning it all, and then making a really committed decision to not be that person anymore. It really helped me bring the center of gravity within, instead of outside of me, which it had been my whole life, and to gain humility, and that path was definitely hugely helped by being part of a 12-step program. I mean, the 12 steps kind of are a guidebook for doing that kind of work, and then also meditation. But I don't think I would have done any of that if it literally took, like, the IRS, the DOJ, the FBI, and the mob, to get me to a place where I was like, right. Like, where, like, to get me to grow up,
well, You know what I think is interesting? I mean, they show you being arrested, but they don't show what it was like when they threw you in jail or wherever they took you at that point. I mean, did it hit you at that point? How scared were you? I mean, at that point?
That was the most terrified I've ever been in my life.
It's worse than the guy beating you up?
Way worse. I knew what that was about. I knew that was, I mean, after he left, like, in the moment, I don't know. It's like you're too shot. Like, you're in.
Yeah, right.
You're, like, in fight or flight.
Like, to really think of.
It's just it's. I don't know. It's on a different level. You're, like, in survival mode. Like, you're just, like, in fight or flight. I don't know. But when you're sitting in a jail cell, and they're like, we don't know how long you're going to be here, and the press release is like, she's looking at 90 years.
Wow.
That's where I'm like, I can't solve for this, you know? After the guy left, the mob guy, I was like, I know what they want, right? And I know I have a choice to make. I'm either going to partner with the mob, which was not an option for me,
right?
Or I'm going to walk away. And then, you know, in a twisted good luck, bad luck situation, they all got taken down in the biggest New York City mob takedown in history, and they went away. But like, I could understand what that was, you know? I didn't understand. I didn't know. I couldn't predict what was going to happen to me and how long I was going to be there. And so like, I like realized quickly, I'm like, you have to do something to stay sane here, you know? So there was like these like cement squares in the cell. And so like I started to try to come up with like equations to figure out how many there were in the entire building, because otherwise I was just going to like lose my mind. You know, I had to like,
yeah, I could see that. You got to do something. And you ended up not getting the worst punishment in the world, and that must have shocked
not at all.
You ended up with a year of probation, $200,000 fine, and 200 hours of community service.
I got off
really easy compared to what you could have. But I thought it was interesting how you held out to not want to throw people under the bus too. I mean, they made that very clear in the book, and I'm going to list some names, and you don't have to deny or say they are the names, but on the internet you hear that some of the people in the games were Leo DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire, Ben Affleck, Alex Rodriguez, Matt Damon, Pete Sampras, Macaulay Culkin. I mean, the list goes on and on. I won't list them all, but in the movie, I think you said you gave 4 names because they'd already been disclosed, and
some people like had just like admitted in the public medium that they'd been part of these games. And so my moral agreement around that was like, okay, they've owned it. The press has reported it, but I just, you know, but I'm not willing to tell stories about them that could like harm their life, you know, but their names is like whatever, and innocuous stories. Like, you know, I can do that.
Well, I love the guy that played the Irish guy. I like him anyway as a comedian.
That was great, isn't he?
Was the guy in real life that annoying?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that was fun. It was a great movie. I hope people watch the movie. I hope they read your book. I hope this was a very, very interesting story. But
Thanks.
I kept thinking, if you were my daughter, oh my God, what would I do?
My poor mom.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she must have freaked out, and your father as well. He handled it pretty well in the way you portrayed it in the movie. But and they don't really show your mother's reaction. So how did she react?
She was a rock star. She flew in, put up her house to get me out of jail for bail, you know, was like, everything's going to be okay. I have incredible parents. And I'm so lucky because they have just been rocks, you know, but also like, this wasn't so shocking to them because first of all, I've been their daughter for, you know, ever. And they saw my life. And, you know, my dad wrote me a letter every year saying like, I'm so worried about you. You know, like it was no surprise to them.
Right.
That
this transformation they saw of you with great, probably nice place, nice things.
Yeah.
Where is this coming from?
You know, right. And I was always like, you know, a good manipulator mouthpiece, and I'm giving them the PG-13 version, but they're not idiots, you know.
Right.
Your 24-year-old kid just bought, you know, is driving a Bentley, and like, I mean, you know,
red flag,
they're like, this doesn't, you know, something's off here.
Well, I think that it's interesting to watch the transformation of you, just, you know, starting off with cheese plates and Kenny Loggins CDs to try and appeal to these guys, to just telling them this is how it is, running the show. You were in control. There were no women. It was all you. You were the woman of the room, right?
Right.
And except for, you know, if you had people serving or dealing or that type of thing. So did they respect you soon? Did it take a long time to get that respect? I'm curious about that.
There is a major shift in how I was treated when I was a cocktail waitress versus when I took over the game. Like when I was a cocktail waitress, they're like, oh, I want to take you out to dinner. I want to buy you like some cute clothes, you know, just like all this stuff. And then, you know, when I became the owner operator, they're like, I don't want to pay you $10,000. That was a that was a bad call. And I'm like, oh, so the purses are off the table. Like it was a major shift, but that's what I wanted. That's who I wanted to be. And that's the role I chose. But I will tell you that I think one of the main things that led to my success and kind of domination of this world, which was so male oriented, was the fact that I was a woman, and I didn't suppress that, and I brought in a fresh perspective, and I have an understanding that really life is about relationships, and it's about taking care of those relationships, and it's about trying to be the peacemaker and trying to be understanding and not coming from ego, and having compassion and empathy, paying attention to details, paying attention to how people feel and what the room looks like. Like, I think those things that we bring to the table as women are huge assets in any business. And so it upsets me when I see like these sort of like how-tos, how to be a woman in a man's world or whatever, where it's essentially urging people to suppress their femininity, to suppress the sort of innate characteristics of what a woman brings to business or brings to an environment, because that's what's going to set you apart,
Well, that kind of reminds me of Susan Cain talking about introversion and certain things that actually brings a positive thing.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I think that we need to embrace those things that make us different. And I think
absolutely.
I mean, when I wrote my dissertation on emotional intelligence, I studied empathy and all the things you're talking about here.
Right.
And I really think that you had to have learned a huge lesson from going through this. So I'm curious, what have you done now? Obviously, the movie just is not that long that it's been out, and you're still in the throes of all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I imagine you speak and do a lot of other things. And what is your goal now? And what's the next step?
So, the reason that I wanted to do this movie is because when I took inventory of the sort of wreckage that I had left my life in, and I really tried to focus on, I got out of self-pity.
Yeah.
And I tried to focus on solution. What I saw as solution was the story. I felt like that was the monetizable asset. That was the unique proposition. And so that's what I focused on. So this whole thing, the writing, the book, the movie and everything, was basically a solution to putting my life back together. I had massive reputational damage. I'm a convicted felon. I was broke. And I just thought that if the story was done in the right way, it could be kind of a massive rebranding campaign.
Right.
And so that started to work now. And simultaneously what happened in doing the kind of work that I discussed with you of like going inside and figuring out how to not get back in these situations where you get hijacked by greed and by all these sort of negative, low energy impulses, was I realized that I need to make my life about something bigger than myself. It can't just be like, how can Molly get ahead today,
Right.
And so now I'm in this awesome situation where I have this platform and I get to, and I'm always going to be ambitious and I'm always going to care about being financially independent and everything. But so now I'm in this cool place where I can kind of build an empire, and I say that loosely, not like that I'm really going to build an empire, but that I can create a career for myself and that meets all these expectations by helping people, by speaking out against, by the lessons, by the mistakes I made, the things I learned. And so, I don't know where that takes me. Right now I'm speaking often. I'm writing another book. I'm pitching some shows in Hollywood. And I'm keeping my eyes and ears open for opportunities where I can build on that sort of platform to help and my most passionate focus is young girls. Yeah. Because I remember so clearly what it was like to be, you go from you're 10 years old, you're playing sports, you're happy, you're free, and then 12, 13 hits and the world becomes a different place. And I remember that struggle and I remember that pain and I remember, what I thought and how I was wrong. And so to be able to intervene at that point and to talk about lessons is something that I'm really super passionate about.
Well, so all this work you're doing now, are you able to monetize, or when you have a felony, how does that work? I mean, do they let you?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because the rule there is like, as long as it's a victimless crime.
I see. And so now, is this life boring to you? I mean, now do you miss your Bentley?
No.
Do you? No.
Mm-mm.
No.
No, it took me a while.
Uh-huh.
But now, like, I really have much less interest in those things. Look, I've been really poor too, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I've and my poor obviously is, I'm not comparing that to like being on the streets, but like there's a leveling of your pride when you have to move back in with your parents and you can't have your own bank account.
Right.
You know?
Uh-huh.
So I'm not like a monk, right? I'm not like eating rice out of a bowl. And you know, I like to live a nice life, but I don't care about amassing large portions of wealth anymore. That's not the thing that's super interesting to me.
Well, so do any of the references to what your past life, when they call you the poker princess or any of these things, does that bring up like memories that make you feel uncomfortable, or is it just something that you just gotten used to? Or
I mean, I'm just in so much gratitude, you know. They can call me whatever they want.
Except you don't want to have what was it? You said Toby Maguire asked you to. Did he ask you to bark? What did he ask you to do? Like a seal?
Yeah. He wanted me to get on the desk and bark like a seal for my tip.
Well, I'm sure you put up with a lot with the group of all those guys doing that.
Right, but I had to draw the line there.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, yeah, you also said that Ben Affleck was the best tipper, right?
Yeah, he was definitely generous.
Well, what do you think drew those guys to that? You know what I mean? To want to do that. What's different from playing that game than just going to Vegas for a weekend? And you know what I mean?
Well, there aren't the kind of poker game, like it's all, you know, there aren't private poker games in Vegas. Maybe there are now, but mostly you're going to have pros at the table who would just who would take their money. These guys are amateur players. This was accessible. This had, you know, sort of a mythology about it. There was a whole science that went into like who was at the table, how much they were playing for, you know, it was, and I think a lot of what drove them is, you know, I think a lot of them were gambling addicts for sure. And it took me a while to see that. But, you know, there was just a lot of attributes that distinguished this game from other games.
So are you a good poker player?
No.
From all this you Googled, I loved how you Googled everything. That'd be exactly what I would do.
Thank God for Google.
Right. Everything, even if it was in foreign languages or something, right?
Yeah, but like, what if it was like before the internet? I just had to have a dictionary.
That would have been a lot harder, yeah. Well, it's interesting how it all came together with the Ponzi schemes going on and different things, and it all came back into this group. But I guess it was kind of a mixed group that you had there to begin with, so it makes sense that it would all come back to this. But if you hadn't have taken that, when you showed the two fingers, or Jessica Chastain shows the two fingers, like take the 2% off the table, whatever it was. If you hadn't have done that, could it have? You were legal, right? Up until that point.
Yeah, but it was headed nowhere good fast. Yeah. You know, I think the train was coming off the track.
Right. Well, you were on the drugs and everything at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is fascinating to me to see people who have gone through these horrific things and then come back from it and survive to tell these. This is quite a story. I mean, I've had
Thanks a lot.
You've done some amazing recovery from all this. I mean, I've had some interesting people on my show. I mean, I had Eric O'Neill, who took down the biggest spy in FBI history, and in his movie. That was a great movie too.
I bet he was fascinating.
He was fascinating, and I love that show. And these are some of my favorite stories because they're real. I mean, and you just you're watching a movie going, "Oh, it's a cool movie," but then you go, "Wait a minute, she actually had to do this." And it's pretty impressive, though, to see what you were capable of doing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, to be so strong in a room full of tough guys like that, and to run. I mean, you're running a business, so you're what an entrepreneur mind you have. So I'll be really curious to follow you to see what you do next. And
thanks. I'll try to not let you know.
Yes, please don't go back that way. But I highly suspect you won't. And
No,
I
I'm done.
think
I'm
this,
done with crime.
yeah, I mean, I've watched your interviews. I saw you were on Ellen. I think, how much did you say you made in a night? What was the biggest night that you've made money-wise?
I don't remember my biggest night. I know I was making like $4 million a year. I think like 150, I've definitely made $150,000 in a night before.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a different world when you get to that level, and I'm sure
Yeah.
this will be a whole different world going in this direction. But I think you can do a lot to help people, and I think that this is a really fascinating story, and I'm really glad you shared it. And I'm sure a lot of people want to find out more. If they haven't seen the movie, they can, obviously go see the movie. They could read your book. But do you have websites or anything you want to share?
Yeah, I have a website. It's basically just to collect people's information for when we go out with different conferences, different things that we're doing, and that's I'mMollyBloom.com. And then my Twitter and Instagram are both I'm Molly Bloom.
Well, thank you, Molly. This was so
Thank
fascinating.
you.
Oh, you're welcome. And we'll be back right after this message.